Welcome to Luxury on Air, where we explore the trends, innovations, and personalities defining and redefining the luxury industry.
Welcome back to Luxury on Air. My name is Karine Szegedi, and I'm very happy to welcome our loyal listeners back to explore this new episode together. Today we are speaking on greening watches and jewelry collaboratively for a tangible impact. We have the privilege to speak with Iris Van Der Veken, Executive Director of the Watch and Jewellery Initiative 2030, which is an initiative guided by the 10 principles of the United Nations Global Compact and 17 SDGs, with the mission of accelerating positive impact on climate resilience, preservation of resources, and fostering inclusiveness. Thanks so much for being with us today, Iris. It's great to have you, and I'm really excited to hear what we are going to discuss about.
Well, thank you, Karine. I'm actually very delighted to join you today, and thank you for inviting me.
So maybe, a lot to discuss, and I think the topic is very close to my heart. I mean, Iris, you made us the privilege of being here, even though you just came back from COP28, and maybe you can hear some insights during the conversation. But before we go into the Jewelry and Watches Initiative 2030, can you give us more information about your personal background? I mean, how did you come to the position of Executive Director of the Watches and Jewellery Initiative 2030 in Geneva, just before you have been CEO of the Responsible Jewelry Council, and before a very exciting career? We just spoke about it earlier. Give us some impact, some information.
Well, Karine, indeed, I've been now over 2 decades in the jewelry industry. So just like you, I deeply care about this industry. But actually, if you look at my background, I studied law and international relations. And I started actually 20 years ago, originally as a human resources manager, but for one of the biggest site holders of the De Beers Group. At that time, it was Rosie Blue. And it was interesting because it was an actually complete new environment for me. I mean, when I graduated from school, my first job was actually at a stock market company in technology. And then I moved to the jewelry industry, and it was a family business. So coming from this very structured approach in reporting to a family business with 15,000 people worldwide, with sites all over the world from India to Thailand and Sri Lanka, it was actually a very new experience to me. And also the product, I had no clue what diamonds was about. I had no clue how actually these diamonds were sourced from mining and actually then come into a retail boutique. So it was a huge learning experience. And I think at the same time, what was interesting, Karine, is when I arrived in the industry, this was early 2000. So this was just when the Kimberley process was set up. As you know, the Kimberley process is a commitment to remove conflict diamonds from the global supply chain. And about that same time, you also had the movie Blood Diamonds with Leonardo DiCaprio, which was shaking the whole industry. So around that period, a lot was happening, and I would almost say the first steps on sustainability were embedded. And if I look back, I think those first steps were instrumental. You saw a new business model in the sense that the mining houses were pushing on the supply chain. They actually wanted their manufacturers and their clients to be more transparent and to have the first social audits. And I must say, I really applaud the work there from companies like Rio Tinto, De Beers, etc., because they actually were the pioneers in bringing this kind of model to the table. But then what you also saw was in 2005, the Responsible Jewellery Council that was founded. Again, a big milestone to ask companies to commit to a code of practices, to have an independent audit. So these were all kind of moves that were happening in the industry. And at the same time, Karine, I was kind of naturally thrown into the sea. And what I mean by that was I started to, from my human resources background, I started to go much more into factories, looking at the social side, looking at labor practices, looking at health and safety, looking at over hours, because when Valentine is coming or Christmas, like that is happening now, then of course you have all these potential issues on over hours, and production. And more I started to realize how actually sustainability is not an add-on, but it needs to be integrated in the operations of a factory environment. And I also saw the beauty if you really take care of your people and you have, good wage structure and you have the opportunity that there's an infrastructure for the children to go to school and you do a lot of community support, that actually there was a business case to retain people. So I must say it was an amazing experience working on audits, ISO 14001, S8000, learning from the ground up, how you can really make a difference on the people's lives that our product touch. And then indeed, I had the opportunity at a later stage to move to the Middle East to work for Dubai Multi-Commodity Center in a project with the OECD on responsible sourcing of gold. So again, a topic very close to my heart, transparency, integrity, a little bit more from the policy side. And I think if I go back throughout that career, I think one of the elements that I also learned, Karine, was that, no one can do this alone. If you want to be successful, you need partnerships and you need public and private. And I had the honor for Belgium to be the chairwoman of the Global Compact for Belgium, which probably was the biggest learning curve for me to learn about the essence of diplomacy and learning from other sectors what you can do together, to change lives on the ground. So I would say over those past 20 years, I had the privilege to work, on the side of factories in the middle of the supply chain, then indeed at the policy side. And then, of course, a magical step also happened when I had the opportunity to lead Responsible Jewellery Council, because it's nice when in 2005, I was there when that baby was born. Then when you are 20, almost 20 years later, you can lead it and bring it to the next level. I would say leaving the Responsible Jewellery Council was not an easy decision, but a very conscious one. And I still stand 100% behind that decision because I do believe it is super important when difficult issues arise that you're consistent with your values. And again, who would have known? I thought when I left London, I thought maybe I will change industries. Maybe I will do something very different with my life. And then I received the most beautiful opportunity I think I've ever had in my career to lead the Watch and Jewellery Initiative 2030, which I think is a combination of everything I've learned till now that I can apply.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, listening to you is just fascinating. And that's overall, I mean, you have so much experience and all these different roles have shaped who you are now. I think that really shows that sustainability came to you. You didn't look for it, but I mean, you were just into different missions that you were doing. And nobody can tell you what it is to be in a mine because you've seen it. Huh? You've been to the factory, you've been to the mine, and you've seen as well how policies are being made because you've been part of this journey.
Yeah, Karine, and I think one element I find super important is when people take a social responsibility role, that they actually go on the ground. They have to realize actually what happens in the processes. Sustainability, it's not, like I said, it's not an add-on. It needs to be really strategically embedded. And sometimes when I look at slides and some people say, this is my business strategy and this is my sustainability strategy, I get very confused because in my view, you should have one strategy and really rethink your whole business model. How do you operate? What are your processes? What are your management systems? How do you report back? And that you have a solid business case towards your stakeholders.
And that's probably, maybe we should go back now. What is the Jewelry and Watches Initiative 2030 for the listeners who are maybe less familiar? I mean, you are in the Maison de la Paix here in Geneva, so the House of Peace, which is absolutely fantastic, close to the United Nations, where you're very close to. But maybe for the listeners outside of Switzerland, it's less familiar. You want to maybe introduce the initiative to us?
Yeah, with great honor, Karine. So the Watch and Jewellery Initiative 2030 was actually founded by Cartier and Kering. And that's on its own a very unusual combination when you have two competitors coming together to set up a new organization. The title says itself, 2030. It's connected to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. As you know, this is the biggest agenda of the world. And really, we know that agenda is behind. If you look at the latest figures, 85% of the SDGs is not on track. And I think it's in that capacity, actually, that those CEOs said, we, as a luxury industry, we need to step up. We need to do more. And let's look at the topics that are very meaningful on that agenda, that are interconnected. And one, of course, is climate action. And the second one, preserving resources, is all about biodiversity, nature, and impact. And the third one, the third pillar, is inclusiveness, which really focuses much deeper on the operationalization of human rights, the gender agenda, the D&I agenda, and also the vulnerable communities. So this is really a CEO collective action forum. And I think what is super important when people ask me, so this is like a movement. And then I always say, no, this is not about a movement. This is really about collective action, of course, through a movement of CEOs who push some of these boundaries. But this is really about measurable results. And we believe, through this collaboration that one, we can actually push the industry to the next level. And let's be very humble. We need to be humble, but through this coalition, we can already push some leadership topics higher on the agenda of the CEOs. And second, we also believe we have a unique opportunity to really, hopefully also create some innovation through working together. And at the end of the day, the 2030 agenda is just around the corner. So we need to step up. So you're very passionate about it.
I can hear that. And I think it's part of your personality, but you're probably as well at the right place at the right moment in your new job. And we can clearly hear this. Maybe some different points to unpack. I mean, once you mentioned that there should not be a business strategy and a sustainability strategy. It should be embedded in the company. We have issued our Deloitte watch industry study just in October. And one of our 6 key findings was greening from the inside out, saying that last year sustainability was done by the companies because the consumers were pressuring, because there was some reporting requirements, because they needed to reduce their emissions. But it was not a business strategy, or it was not coming from the top. What we feel this year, much more CEOs globally have seen the importance of embedding sustainability and really pushing for it. And when we speak with different companies, they say, well, once my CEO was intimately convinced that this is the right route, this changed everything. I mean, we get resources, the message is clear, and everybody in the company is following. How do you see that as well? I mean, who are your members? Are they ready to go in this journey, or are they forced to go into this journey? Where are they in the maturity level?
Well, Karine, you said it so rightly. The CEO is the heart of sustainability. I don't believe any strategy will be successful if you do not have the top that is going to walk the talk and also give the resources and the capacity to the teams to be able to embed it into their operations. I think the beauty of this initiative is because it is a voluntary initiative. It is actually the CEOs who make the decision to commit. And I must say, I believe I'm a bit privileged, with, for example, if you think Mr. Sylvain Guérin from Cartier, but if you think about Catherine Renier from Jaeger-LeCoultre, if you look at Kering, the CEOs, all of them, I think, have one thing in common. They want to push and move the agenda, and they want to move the needle. And I see it because, one, they are prepared to do funding, they're prepared to put extra capacity on specific projects, and they participate, and their teams are actively involved. And that's critical. Yeah, without their support, nothing can move the needle.
I'm fully convinced. And what is interesting, I mean, Iris, you mentioned in your career as well, you were chairwoman, you were a part of different initiatives. Here in your ecosystem, you have players who are usually competitors, who don't necessarily know each other or discuss or exchange with each other. How do you manage to bring them at the same table, to collaborate and to work towards the future?
Well, first of all, there needs to be, I think, a conscious motivation to work together. And I think I'm lucky there that the CEOs have decided to join, are very committed, and you see that last year we had a CEO forum hosted by Cartier and Kering in Paris. We had actually over 70 CEOs present. We also invited some CEOs that were not part of the initiative because we thought it was important to widen the ecosystem to look at the future of responsibility in the industry. So you have this group of committed CEOs. One component that I do believe is very important to mention, Karine, is that it's very critical to have a robust governance framework. And from the start, actually, we invested quite some resources to have a solid mechanism as a governance model. And allow me to give you a little bit of reflections on it. I think, first of all, we should not forget we are working with competitors, so antitrust is critical. Mm. Second, we are a coalition, and the integrity of the coalition needs to be protected. If one company gets hit, it has a ripple effect on the others. And that's always what I always tell also to our industry, when I see an article mentioning, some issue with a company in the industry at large, it makes me actually sad because it has a ripple effect on the whole industry. And that's why, especially in our industry, where you are selling such a product with such a high emotional currency, you absolutely need to be accountable and take care to protect that integrity. So, and we've really tried to set that model of governance in different areas. And it starts, of course, at the top in the board. Within the board, first of all, the diversification, 2 independent board directors. One is Dr. Anino Imua, founding woman of 100 Women of Davos. She walks the talk. She embraces D&I. Second, Georg Kell, founding father of the Global Compact, the largest sustainability initiative in the world. As 2 independent directors, they really mirror our work. They give us direction, they challenge us, and they bring, I think, the organization to the next level. Second, within the board, of course, we're very privileged. We have the CEO of Chanel, Jewelry, Mr. Frédéric Ranger. At the same time, we have suppliers like Lucia Mattioli. We have a manufacturer. So we have to have that diversified part of a board, that you have different parts of a supply chain. But then I think what is very unique to the initiative is that we have different levels of advisory committees. And one is the multi-stakeholder engagement committee, which is actually a reflection of the NGO world, where you have different organizations that are present to be able, again, to reflect on the work we do. So anything that we actually are producing needs to be discussed within this group and can also get critical feedback or additional comments, etc. And then at the same time, we also have a risk and independent compliance committee. So if an issue arises, it's very important that there's a very clear pathway that issue can be managed through that independent risk and compliance committee, so that there's no conflict of interest with any of the board members. Yeah. So we really tried, and if you look at our stakeholder report, and I invite the listener to go on our website, you will see that, a lot of care was placed in setting up that governance model. Yeah.
And I see this, the various, serious structure, which is important to start with. But of course, then your members, there's different maturity levels in the members as well. Huh? Some have thought about the contact and the challenges and the learnings before the others. How do you bring them at the same level to be able to discuss together? Or are some need more support from you and others are maybe more the leaders or the visionaries?
Well, Karine, I think that's probably the $1 million question that you just asked. I think that has been really a very interesting experiment for us, because we have now, after being operational now for about 15 months, we see what works and what doesn't work. And what I mean by that is, you're very right. We have, of course, different maturity stages of companies, but also different topics that companies are in. So it could be that you are a leader in human rights due diligence and you're just starting your nature journey. So it's a combination of almost having a picture of a company. So how have we tackled it? We always want to have a starting point. So if you think about it, if at Watches and Wonders in a few months, you ask me the question, so Iris, where are you now? Well, our starting baseline has always been, we did a maturity assessment and we'll do one again in January of all the companies. So we really want to understand, where are you on climate? For example, have you set your science-based targets? For example, on nature, have you started your nature risk assessment? On diversity and inclusion, have you signed the Women Empowerment Principles? Do you have an action plan in place? Do you have a D&I strategy? Are you working with artisanal skill miners? Critical questions. So we know we have a very good, what I would call, passport of a company when they arrive into the initiative. And then we measure, in the sense that every year we will look at that assessment again. Once a year, we go a little bit deeper. But on certain topics, we will go every 3 to 6 months. For example, on D&I, we did a survey. 95% of the companies responded. And there we saw very different dimensions that at certain companies, they're really strategic. D&I is a strategic imperative, while others, for example, it's sitting somewhere at human resources department, only focusing on talent acquisition and retention. And that's not criticism, because it's an evolution of a journey. So what we're trying to do now is really get the best practices to the whole group, and where companies are struggling, to give them help desk support. But let me be very clear, Karine, it's not like we are just there to handhold. No, when we do give that support, we ask them to action and again come back to us what they have done. So it's a lot of engagement and interaction. And I must say, it's super important because we have really great partners. For example, ESG Book in London, we've been working for 15 months intensively, looking at all the potential reporting frameworks that are there. We've looked at, for example, the Corporate Social Responsibility Directive of the EU, what's, the legislation that's coming, and then actually thinking, okay, if you're a starter, if you're a beginner, what are the parameters that you have to report on? If you're advanced, these are the parameters. If you're a leader, this is the complete package, but then also you're aligned with a new updated regulatory framework. We don't want people to report. People have to report because it's meaningful, because it tells an honest, credible narrative on where they are. And maybe I'm naive, Karine, but I always believe if you do that honestly and you are open about your boundaries, then I think no one can really be upset with you. I think it's the worst thing is to start seeing things you're not doing or trying to indeed go into greenwashing or blue washing or pink washing or SDG washing. I think that's the risk. And that's why actually we've invested also a lot of resources with ESG Book on setting up that accountability mechanism that in Q1 2024 we will launch and also test the waters with, not only with advanced companies, but also with startups.
Okay, this was a very rich answer, and I'm trying to reflect on it because the greenwashing, in essence, the hard luxury industry, especially in watches and jewelry, is quite, it's circular. No? Let's say that the luxury watches and jewelry would stay forever. You can give it to the next generation. But overall, there's always still a lot of criticism on the luxury industry of being, not necessary. Luxury in essence is unnecessary. The spending, the behavior of the consumers. It's still an industry that is criticized. And of course, the reporting obligations for the time being are not very stringent. And as you mentioned, some companies that reported in the past had to review what they reported because things have changed, more information is available, systems were not up to date. As you say, if you reported wholeheartedly with the best information at the moment, you should not be punished for that. But the confidence in the overall market and consumers and I would say the press is not always positive. There is some greenwashing. Anyhow, it's not being audited, so the information, what do we know? And is the industry really wanting to change, or are they just trying to get more consumers because they know the values of the consumers? What is your take on the state of the, let's say, watches and jewelry industry or luxury as a whole with the ESG topic?
Well, for me, sustainability is an evolution. And when you want to start telling your story about your brand, it needs to be authentic. So it needs to be about, your maison, connected to your values, what you're doing for the people, for the planet, for the community. Will it be perfect? No, because we live in a very imperfect world. But I think as long as that narrative indeed is authentic and it's based on facts and really facts and credible data, scoped, with boundaries, then I think you're doing fine. I have, of course, followed the luxury industry for, the past 25 years, and I have seen sometimes, that criticism, they're not transparent enough. At the same time, sometimes I really honestly believe, and I'm not trying to defend us, is that sometimes it was generally, not about not willing to disclose, just not yet ready to disclose, I think, or it was just the nature of the maison not to really communicate explicitly. it was also never asked really about stakeholders, Karine, right? If you think about it, the past 10 years, we've seen an enormous push. And the last, I would say, 3 to 5 years, we've seen an enormous push of the millennials and the Gen Z that are asking more information and these activists. But before that, it was more the mystique about the maison. It was a bit, all mysterious. And so I think that evolution will not stop. So what I do believe now is that the watch industry has a unique opportunity to tell the story of luxury, because on its own, you are not going to throw away a beautiful watch, right? You're going to protect it. If it gets broken, you're going to repair it. If my son gets 25 years old, I think he will get maybe a watch from my father. It's something, it has such a huge over-generational model that on its own is fantastic. What I do believe in is that because we are about luxury, that luxury has a double duty to care and to give back. And I think it's that purpose that probably everyone has to reinvent for themselves or realign with what they've done. Because I'm always really surprised in a positive sense when I go and visit maisons. First of all, they have a legacy, they have a history, they have artisanal skills. It's the most amazing process how a watch is made. If you think about the savoir-faire, the artisanal skills, those people, when you see them touch the watch, it's actually incredible to see that passion, but also that knowledge. It's art, it's about creation of art and beauty. And I think with that, really, we need to see what can we do more for society, and not just as individual maisons, but I think also more in the collective. What can we do, for example, in Switzerland to accelerate, for example, the D&I agenda, or to bring more, to bring gender to the table, or maybe to bring more underprivileged youngsters into the industry to learn certain artisanal skills. I think it gives also a huge opportunity.
Yeah, and I like the responsibility of luxury of doing even more, because I think there is. The companies are successful. The companies are there to last, and to give back is quite a nice gesture and an important gesture in that space. When you've chosen to work on climate resilience, preservation of resources, fostering inclusiveness. I mean, looking at the 10 principles of United Nations and the 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, how have you chosen where you want to spend most of your time, or what are the most relevant ones to watches and jewelry in particular? Was that a complicated task? Did it come naturally? Or did you work maybe again in an ecosystem and in building these principles?
Well, I think what we've tried to do is touch actually the heart of a sustainability strategy. And sometimes, we talk about 3 pillars, but actually they're so interconnected. You were introducing me, that I just came back from the COP. I think sometimes we seem to disconnect certain subjects. And one thing that really touched me when I was in Dubai was that climate change will push up to 158 million more women and girls into poverty and lead to 236 million more women into hunger. We seem to forget that. Women commonly face higher risks and greater burdens, of course, from the impacts of climate change in situations of poverty. And we know, the majority of the world's poor are women. So how can you change those inequalities and how that all is linked? And I think that's something that has actually started to fascinate me much more, how all these topics are really interconnected and what you can do. So I think with the initiative, we really wanted to touch what matters. Climate, we see it every day. We're confronted with it. Mm-hmm. And I think we can only do that through science, Karine. You need to have data, you need to set targets, and you need to bring in your suppliers. And again, for the luxury brands, I think it's a huge responsibility to see them as your extended family that you take care of. You teach them about climate, you teach them about biodiversity, you help them set targets, and you bring it as one value chain. The second on nature, I think that's probably the topic that I personally know not much about, and where I'm actually every day obliging myself to, I would say, read the alphabet on nature, because it is so critical. And also, if we think about us as an industry, if you think about jewelry with colored gemstones or diamonds or silver materials and where they come from, so what is actually that impact? Maybe it's from a biodiversity hotspot in Madagascar, right? What do you do as an industry? And you can't do that alone. But how can you start as a company, again, working with your suppliers, understanding your value chain, and then indeed thinking about what actions you can take to turn it around? And on the third pillar, one of the components that has really touched me is gender-responsive procurement. The jewelry industry has been known to be a very male-dominated industry. And I've been there for a long time myself. And, it was something you almost got used to. It definitely has gotten better, which is great, but it's not enough. If you think 90% of consumer behavior is influenced by women, where are the women at the leadership top? So we have tested a tool with UN Women, which is called the Gender Responsive Procurement Tool. It's actually a tool in development, and we're the first organization to test it with 9 brands. Cartier, Monica Vinader, Gucci, but then also some manufacturers like Rosy Blue, Swarovski also tested it. And we wanted to understand actually how much are these companies buying from women entrepreneurs or companies that are really have very strong systems into place to embed gender as part of their policy into the procurement. And you can find the case study, which was launched at the General Assembly in New York in September, but very interesting results. Karine, for example, often chief procurements have never heard about gender-responsive procurement sometimes. They don't know, they were not educated, there's no data available. So what can we do? And so we're now going to the pilot phase 2, and our objective is really to kind of set guidance and then to be able to share that with the industry at large. We recently launched the Human Rights Navigator, which is a big piece of work on how can you really manage due diligence better and see it actually as knowing much more about your supply chain and stepping away from just a risk model, right? But really seeing it as an opportunity to understand better your supply chain, better your human rights impact, and helping where there are gaps or where there are issues for potentially remediation, not always easy. But, not, I would say, shining away from it. And we also did a review with Human Rights Watch. They reviewed the tool. We've launched it now, and we're going to test it with suppliers. And also, again, we need to be humble. Karine, if it's not practical enough, we will need to shape it up. But it's really our objective to bring the suppliers on the journey of sustainability as part of, the colleagues, our colleagues, Without them, we can't do it.
Iris, you're never short of ideas and new initiatives. I can feel that. I can feel this energy. It's amazing. So you said that you work with brands, you work with suppliers, you test things. What about the consumers? I mean, of course, your initiative is not about the consumers as such, but let's just think and reflect. I mean, of course, we know the luxury consumers. You mentioned a lot of female consumers. More and more ladies buy as well themselves jewelry or watches before it was maybe more a gift. The consumers are becoming younger as well. Of course, they not only buy new jewelry or watches and as well pre-owned, now that we know that the market is more liquid and it's quite an interesting behavior. But on the other side, they don't want to become the sacrificed generation, because now everybody is like feeling pressured, not to travel anymore, not to spend on unnecessary goods, not to, to have a different behavior. But we still see, when we see this thriving luxury industry and thriving consumptions overall, is the behavior really changing? Do you see something, or is it just brands have to do it, but the consumer is free on living his life as they did before?
I think it's a difficult subject. First of all, I think it's great that the consumer has evolved and become more conscious. When I see millennials and Gen Z react, and then they'll have the alpha generation, and they want to not only work for a company of purpose, but also buy from a company of purpose, that's great. But then if you really have to pay, let's say, a bigger contribution for a sustainable choice, we often see also in surveys that then actually that behavior doesn't follow. So I think there's still a lot to do about educating the consumers. And I think there also the luxury brands have an opportunity to tell the narrative to the consumer, but like I said earlier, in a very authentic way, as part of, their storytelling, how their products are made, where the materials are coming from, what is it contributing to society. And if consumers want to know more information, I think it will be a matter of time that it will be completely pushed by the regulatory framework, what you already see now, what's coming. So we need to get ready for this data-driven information. On the other hand, I think we should also be careful, that at the end of the day, these are brands, they need to tell the story. And I think you also have to keep the beauty and the mystery of the story to discuss.
Yes,
and the magic.
Luxury has always been a bit mysterious. I mean, inaccessible. If it's accessible, it's not luxury anymore. And it's true that's too much information of exactly who, when, where, how. It's killing a bit, the mystic of the product, because it should be something exceptional.
But I always think about myself, if I really find something very beautiful, I will first look at the company. So I will look at really the company, the ownership, and understand, who is the CEO, what are they doing, where are they manufacturing? And then I will look at the brand. I will often not go in that detail then anymore of a certain brand, because I'm convinced, maybe rightly or wrongly, that it's a good company to buy from. While if you think about it, and I think that's going to be the interesting evolution, if we really think about product passports, it's not just about the management systems anymore of a company. It's really about the individual information of a product, where it will not only just be about where is the source coming from, but what kind of positive impact did it have on nature, on climate? How did it touch lives? So in my view, the next 5 to 10 years is really going to shake up also the marketing of companies. Because with everything that's happening also on the regulatory framework on making claims, companies will have to be very careful how they market their story.
And that's maybe, because what we do like at Luxury on Air is, of course, we're looking at the future trends. So I think you have explained how the state of the industry, the collaboration, which is fantastic. And I hope it will continue and enhance it, that you have new members joining maybe after this podcast, and you can maybe give a few words on how to join you. But I think what I'd like to know is sustainable luxury. I mean, what are a few big trends? You mentioned marketing is one of them, but what is shaping the luxury sustainable industry in the next 5 to 10 years? What do you see will really happen, and you think will happen?
I think first of all, sustainability will become part of innovation into the operations. So while sustainability was like the sustainability department, in my view, it will become part of the CEO's office, and it will be innovation and people. Because one is you need to innovate to find probably new ways of manufacturing. You need to find new circular models, new materials, at the same time, new technologies on traceability, on transparency, on whatever, how you're going to create your product. And then at the same time, you need to find the right people. So for me, sustainability will all be about innovation. Second, we will all have to push data, but relevant data. And that means it's going to change your whole operational infrastructure, because data will not just be about one part of the value chain. It will become quite complicated, depending on the materials. And if you think about, for example, colored gemstones is 85% artisanal. Where are you going to find that information? If you think about what's happening now with the G7, the segregation of Russian and non-Russian diamonds. So I think traceability and transparency will be not only a hot topic, but it will be actually every CEO's priority on the agenda to have a very I would say, a very grounded strategy. But not a strategy just to segregate, but really a strategy on transparency and trust to the consumer. So I don't think it's just one component of that. It just needs to be a whole holistic strategy. I think that every brand will also have to define its purpose. Even though, some of these maisons have been there for decades, this new consumer is asking new information, has very different kind of behavior. My mother, I remember, she would buy a piece of, or she would receive a piece of jewelry from my father, right? 5 years marriage, 10 years marriage, 25 years marriage, fantastic.
Bravo.
55 now, so I can't do that anymore. But I think the beauty is there that we will have to really rethink how are we going to communicate with that new consumer whose behavior is very, very different, and who also makes sometimes very different luxury choices and doesn't stay always loyal to one brand. So then I also think that regulations will continue to evolve and put pressure on the companies. And one component within the regulatory framework, aside from data, will also be governance. I think every company will have to reshape its governance, where D&I will become the standard. So how can you get ready to really transform your organization and integrate D&I and also attract the right people with the right skill set? The future is for me about decency, dignity, and transparency. And for luxury, those are non-negotiable.
I think after these few words, I cannot say anything more. This is a great end to our podcast. It was super interesting. And I hope that the listeners learned more. And I hope as well that the industry learned more and that they can join you if they didn't know, because you really are there to help them. Right? You're not the police. You are an initiative to bring them together, to educate and to help.
Yeah, I would say, Karine, not, of course, we are here to enable, but I think it's more to action. I think one thing that I must say that Marie-Claire Daveux, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer of Kering, and Mr. Vigneron always say, it's really about actioning, but we don't want to leave anyone behind. So we want to really bring the companies on a journey because it's the right thing to do.
And there we are back at inclusiveness. Thank you for being inclusive, Iris. Very nice for you. And thank you so much for joining. I genuinely loved our conversation and the passion and the kindness. I think that in everything you do really comes across. So I was really honored to speak with you today. And thanks for sharing all the information about the Watch and Jewellery Initiative 2030 with our listeners.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Luxury on Air with Karine Szegedi and Felicitas Morhart. This podcast is provided to you by Deloitte Switzerland and the Swiss Center for Luxury Research. If you've enjoyed this episode, you can leave us a 5-star review. If you're keen to stay up to date on what's trending in the luxury industry, don't forget to subscribe. As always, you can find more information about the current episode in the show notes. We wish you all the best. Until next time.